I'm Premjit Dasgupta, and I teach courses related to urban and mobility planning at the School of Planning and Architecture, Bhopal, or SPA Bhopal. It is an institute of national eminence set up by the Government of India in 2008 in the central Indian city of Bhopal. We are empowered by an act of parliament of India to impart higher education in the fields of architecture, planning, and design. Bicycle research has been one of the focus areas of research in SPA Bhopal for quite some time. And in 2019, we were very fortunate to receive a grant from the Government of India for a sponsored research project on an experiment for using electric bicycles for electric bicycle sharing in a rural setting in India. So while we were working on that, we faced an unfortunate situation where we were not able to deploy the cycles due to the lockdown which has started in India from around the middle of March. So we thought, why not take this opportunity to connect with our peers to find out what is the state of the art in bicycle research, to revisit the literature, to revisit the science of cycling, and to get to know from the experts what are the needs of this hour. What do we need to study at this moment? What new things are emerging as far as bicycle research is concerned? We have got some very distinguished speakers today, and I'm very thankful to them for joining at such short notice. In fact, I was able to contact them around a couple of weeks back, and we have actually, very interestingly, for our project, we had referred to the papers published by Professor Cherry, by Dr. Zhao, and Dr. Pandit has been a long-time contact from IIT Kharagpur. And it's an honor today to get you all on board, to see you in front of us and to share your knowledge to our students. In fact, in the audience today, we mostly have students. We have a very large number of master's students from our own school and also from IIT Kharagpur, from where Dr. Pandit belongs. And we also have quite a few doctoral research scholars from different institutes, and also some bachelor students are there. So we had a large number of registrations, and the joining is still on. I've added everyone to the Google Calendar, so I hope people are able to join automatically without me having to admit all of them. In case you are facing some issues, just let me get off this slide. And once we start the proceedings, you can keep joining, but please let us keep the joining time till 6:10 p.m. India time, so that we can have a smooth session. So with that, I would like to introduce our first speaker for the day. And okay, let me just go back again to what you are seeing on the screen, the focal points for today's webinar, what we actually thought we would discuss today. So what are the new considerations that should go into the planning of bicycle infrastructure and bicycle sharing services? What imperatives are there in bicycle transit integration? And how can we integrate bicycles with transit effectively? How can we make bicycling smart? What are the determinants of e-bicycle use, and what more do we need to know about it? What are the parameters for e-bicycle sharing service? What is the current scenario of bicycle sharing, and what are the challenges and opportunities? These are some of the broad questions that I have listed down here, and our speakers are going to be discussing on these things, and all of our speakers have their own presentations. So I will start first with Dr. Pandit. I'll just introduce Dr. Pandit. He received his Bachelor of Architecture from Jadavpur University, India, Master of City Planning from the Indian Institute of Technology, Kharagpur, and PhD from the University of Tokyo, Japan. His research interests include transportation planning and routing services, public transport, traffic management and safety, and IT-based infrastructure and information systems. He's currently the principal investigator of two very prestigious projects. One on developing appropriate infrastructure for bicycle sharing systems, a pilot study in the IIT campus itself. And another one on the use of ITS in public transport services. Both of these are funded by the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, Government of India. His past projects include a framework for improving bicyclists' accessibility to rail stations, funded by the Ministry of Human Resource Development, Government of India. With that, I would request Dr. Pandit to come on board and please start your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Pranjit. It's a nice to get an invite from you suddenly out of the blue that you have to give a seminar. So very happy to join. And so let's not take. So what's the time do we have? Till what time should we? 10 minutes, 15 minutes? What should we target?
15 minutes will be good, Dr. Pandit. 15 minutes will be very good. I mean, it's not a barrier. If it's really something that you have, I mean, if there's some extension to your presentation, that can also go on for some time. And 15 minutes will be very good.
Yes?
Yeah, you can go ahead, Dr. Pandit.
Okay. So we have titled our presentation as Smart Sustainable Mobility and Cycling, Identifying Research Needs in the Aftermath of COVID-19. And I've been assisted by Deepa Sharma. She is the project officer at CFL, City Future Lab. So we are a research lab working in IIT Kharagpur. So our research group is called City Future Lab. And we work in different areas. We work in urban informatics, we work in land use transportation, we work in advanced transportation systems, we do infrastructure design, we have been currently working on IoT and connected devices. We also work on different neighborhood design projects as well. So this is the broad area in which my research scholars as well as project staff work. And within that, if I look into the recent bicycle projects, these are some of the work that we have done. For example, one of the projects you already mentioned, Professor Premjit already mentioned, that is framework for improving bicyclist accessibility to metro rail stations in Kolkata. We have been optimizing and the redistribution strategy for public bicycle sharing systems. We have been designing different public bicycle sharing systems. We are working on hyperlocal delivery. We are developing both hardware and software for fully automated self-service bicycle share systems. We are also designing a lot of mobility projects as well. So these are two of our large projects that you talked about. So one of this project is pubs. You can locate at pubs.in. You can get all the information about our bicycle sharing and infrastructure project. Whereas the other one, pubs.co.in, this is all about bus transit. But it doesn't include the project. This one is an old bus project that was completed in the year 2019 itself. So now coming to the present situation, if you see worldwide, we have to live in a post-COVID world, and in fact, our country is just on the we are moving. Our infection rate is pretty low, but at the same time, the total number of infected people are pretty high. So we are yet to reach the peak, and then so we are in for a long haul. So what we are seeing in terms of impacts or implications in terms of mobility and particularly to bicycling, we are seeing that public transit probably in our country, even though this is not the situation, but worldwide public transit and ride-hailing services has fallen by around 70 to 90%. New York, Milan, Bogota, what they're doing is they're adding more space for cyclists because it seems to be the best way to go. It's the most safest way compared to getting on a public transit or on our app-based cab services. Particularly for India, not everybody has got a car and not everybody can afford a car. So cycle is one of the options what urban planners have started looking into. So there have been many cases where streets have been closed. Transit fare has been suspended so that people use transit, but still not many people are using. There have been streets have been closed to vehicle traffic to facilitate social distancing among pedestrians and maybe even among cyclists. There are free bicycling sharing systems have been cropping up, and then temporary bicycle lanes has been created. So this all is taken from a report. And we can see that in this particular map, there are some places in the US particularly, where we can also in Australia, like in Perth and Sydney, there has been some automated signal systems have been brought in to facilitate this kind of movement, then temporary bike lanes, then free bike share systems, and then of course street closures and fare suspension for transit. So this is the current situation. Now, looking at that, my first area of talk would be to discuss the different imperatives in effective bicycle transit integration in the present times. So transit, of course, people are not that keen to use at this point of time, but in Indian conditions, there is no other alternative, because we are a country of almost 130 million people, and then most of the people are poor. They don't have their own cars. Even not everybody has got two-wheelers. So to manage this huge amount of people, we have no other option but to use transit buses and all. And instead of getting into other modes like paratransit, like auto rickshaws and all, where people sit together very close, or even in cab services, I think.
Dr. Pandit, can I just interrupt you for a moment? Are you presenting a PPT?
Yes.
But it's not visible. The PPT is not visible. We are getting a lot of inputs on chat. Can you just check on that once?
Okay.
We will wait for some time. We'll wait for them. Not an issue.
Okay.
Just check once.
Just a moment. Is it fine? Are you able to see the PPT?
Yes, Dr. Pandit, it is visible now. You can carry on. Thank you so much.
Okay, let me know if it's not, it goes away in between, right?
Sure.
So I will take you through the slides. Did you see the slides?
No, we are just, you can maybe go back.
Okay, fine. I will just, take you through once more.
Yeah, okay,
so
thank you.
This is the, title of our presentation, Smart Sustainable Mobility and Cycling, Identifying Research Needs in the Aftermath of COVID-19. And then we are the city, just to introduce our lab. We are City Future Lab at IIT Kharagpur. These are the different areas that we work in. It ranges from urban informatics, land use transportation, advanced transportation, infrastructure design, IoT and connected devices, neighborhood design, and so on. And then,
Dr. Pandit, just
yes.
One more interruption. I'm so sorry. Can you maximize the window?
That is, I think the last time I did that, it stopped. So that's why I didn't. Okay, let me know if it's, stops.
Okay.
Is it fine now?
Yes, it's fine. Perfect.
Okay, great. Okay, great. Okay. So these are the different projects that I was talking about earlier. For example, framework for improving bicyclist accessibility to metro rail stations, optimizing the redistribution strategy for public bicycle sharing system, the bike share projects that we are doing right now, and then other projects that we have taken, like hyperlocal delivery systems, where currently many delivery partners are actually using cycle to deliver food, like from Zomato or from other companies. So these are two of our websites you can check to look at the little projects that we do. So now coming to the impact and implications of mobility and bicycling in a post-COVID world, I was just talking about earlier regarding in a lot of places, public transit and ride-hailing services are not seen as an option in the current future. And at many places, bicycling is being promoted. At many places, we have temporary bicycle lanes been set up. We have a lot of street closures to facilitate pedestrian movement, to maintain social distancing. Many places, there are closing of streets to vehicle traffic, and then there are free bicycle sharing projects or setups which are being also started. So map-wise, if I look at them, there are many of those in US. Then we are seeing some of them in London, for example, this. And then also in Perth, we are seeing some signal systems modifications and so on. So now coming to imperatives in effective bicycle transit integration in the current times, cities must respond by analyzing the current state of infrastructure, technology, and mobility needs. Current solutions should encourage social distancing, thus safe mobility choices. So that being said, one of our projects that we concluded recently actually looked at transit and bicycle integration. So this is one of the projects which actually can help in connecting. In India, we cannot ignore the transit system because very less percentage of the population has got ownership, vehicular ownership, and not even everybody has got two-wheelers. So people fall back on transit and sometimes on paratransit. While transit is still some amount of social distancing is possible, even though it's difficult in India, it's very difficult to do social distancing in paratransit. So when I talk about connectivity between bicycle and transit, it is in many cases it will replace paratransit. So that is where our project can help. What we did in this particular project was we studied many metro stations in Kolkata and many suburban train stations in Kolkata. We did find the total catchment, the distance from which people are coming to the stations, and it is totally different from what our notions are from literature, because we are seeing people coming from even 5, 6 or 7 kilometers away, quite a considerable number of people. And so we really need to take some decisions regarding how much to do how much should be our catchment area for transit, and accordingly we need to lay down infrastructure so that to facilitate bicycle usage. So this project actually was taken up by one of my master's students, and then we have also worked on it later on as part of our project. So what we did was we determined the distance decay functions, but instead of traditional cumulative functions, using standard curves, we tried to determine something called 4PL curve, which looks like a S curve, and then we took derivatives in that curve, and we tried to find out at what location the rate of number of people joining the system is gradually getting less, and accordingly we have decided on the extent of the transit infrastructure. And we also decided that, okay, the transit infrastructure, the extent of this catchment is also aligned as per the metro network or the route. So the direction of movement do play a big role. So we saw that in certain directions, we broke the entire catchment into different segments. And we found that in different directions, that particular extent to which people are traveling to the transit station, that actually vary. So accordingly, we drew our catchment areas, and as you can see, this is the shape is pretty odd, and this doesn't matches the standard notions where we talk about kilometer or two to add that kind of buffer being added to metro stations. So this is not like that. So this is one of our papers which would be which is under publication right now. So we will put up when that gets published. I will be happy to share that. Then once we have decided on this kind of catchment area, we also needed to decide on where we should put on the bicycle routes. So for that bicycle infrastructure, and so accordingly we decided on the bicycle routes. And this was based on many criteria, particularly the standard criteria is to see the bicycle LOS and evaluate the LOS at the different routes. So in our project, we decided to develop our own LOS criteria, and we developed some models on that. And based on that, we determined which are the important parameters, and accordingly, we decided on the kind of network that we will lay. So this is one project that we are talking about. So this is one way to integrate transit and bicycle. And this is primarily if you look into people moving from their house using their cycle, then parking the cycle at the station. then taking the train and going to his destination, and then again, going to his office either by walking or even by paratransit. So this is the situation. So one of our projects actually looked into that. What are the alternatives? So this was a project taken up many years back, maybe around 4 years back. And we, at that point of time, was working on public bicycle share and private bicycle parking systems. And we did this project for Action Area 1 in Newtown. This is a newly developed township adjacent to Kolkata. And here we developed the different bicycle tracks. We developed a station-based bicycle sharing system. And we also developed the technology for this sharing system. We developed the programs, we developed the logic, we developed the RFID-based system, and all this, but it was not a dockless system that you nowadays see in many of the current bicycle shares that has been in India as well as abroad. So this was one of the projects that we undertook. But the primary thing that we did was we designed the total bicycle track for the city, for this new town. And currently, many of that stretches have been developed and many new stretches are being taken up. So you can just see these images that some of the tracks that we have designed, and in some places we have also designed some urban design structures like this Wi-Fi kiosk. Then we have designed this weather protection systems, which are very required for in the Indian context. We have designed, we have done the total design, including both the construction design, the walking drawings, as well as BOQs. So the entire, starting from design to the actual construction, everything was designed. Now, why I stress on this is because if you don't give detailed designs of bicycle track, sometimes people just give profiles of the track, the section, and then they're done with it. And when you leave it to the engineers or leave it to the contractors, they will end up with a system where there are broken tracks. You will see that suddenly the track has ended at some places and it becomes completely unusable. So we did a full 100% design of these tracks, which covered the entire area. There is no gap in this particular, this particular tracks. So this was one project. Similarly, we did another project, which was planning and designing a bicycle track along this Salt Lake Bypass Road. This is everybody knows this stretch in Kolkata. This is the stretch which takes you to the IT Sector 5, that hub. And you see that we have designed a 2-level bicycle track. And one level there is pedestrians. In the another level there is the bicycle track. And certain challenges were there. A lot of infrastructure like this, electric boxes, and also we have not only done the bicycle tracks, we have done the entire urban design for this area. We have designed the bus stops. We have designed all the different things for this particular area. So this was another project that we did. This is a mobility improvement plan for this Sector 5 in Kolkata. This is the IT hub in Kolkata. So here we proposed different kinds of bicycle track. And here we actually saw the actual challenges in designing bicycle tracks for Indian context. Most of the Indian cities have got very thin roads, and there are a lot of this unplanned infrastructure like street lights, electric boxes, telephone boxes, all on and even, then there is intrusions from the vendors, then there are kiosks, then extension of the shops. All these things are there in the Indian context. So this was where we redesigned the entire streetscape, as well as we did, a lot of one-way, two-way planning for this particular area. It's a big area, and we designed the bicycle tracks and all. And that was where we gave a lot of unconventional solutions as well. You can see, we removed one of the parking spaces, and we gave space for bicycle to park over here. And in some places, we have designed the track where I will show you some of the examples later on. Like, for example, we have designed the two-way bicycle tracks on one side of the road, and then we have designed tracks where the tracks doesn't go behind the bus stop because there is no space there. So space is a very big issue in the Indian context. So one of the biggest problem in India is bicycle infrastructure that is being planned. There are problems due to a lot of design standards, adherence to design standards, then lack of enforcement of regulations, encroachment, maintenance issues, complete absence of bicycle infrastructure, unprotected intersections, unorganized parking, and a lot of utilities and services all on the bicycle track. So there are some examples. What you actually see, there are lack of dedicated tracks, discontinuity of bicycle track network, lack of dedicated space for street vendors. Because this is a reality in Indian conditions, we have to have street vendors in our along our streets, and we cannot ignore that. So we have to integrate that in the design. Then there are design issues related with tracks between bus stop and the main carriageway, and so on. So then there are issues of intersection design, lack of continuity of tracks at intersection, lack of design considerations for protected intersections, such as setbacks, refuge areas. So these are not there. So in most of our, and also there are issues of bicycle parking. As you can see, near the station, we see that along the entire pavement, bicycles are parked like that. So this is in one place in Kolkata. Then in many part where the track has been designed, you see a lot of things parked like this. Then a lot of infrastructure is planned along the bicycle track. So that creates problems. So this needs to be planned in a proper way. So we require guidelines, detailed guidelines for this, which is actually missing in the Indian context. And also the guidelines related with signages, markings, street furniture, how to design all this. So our research group has been working in this area. We are now compiling a guideline for bicycle infrastructure. We published this in a book form recently. Within maybe another couple of months, we will be ready with that. So this is based on the experience that we have gathered during our time working on bicycle infrastructure and so on. So when we talk about these solutions, we need to talk about infrastructure solutions. We need to talk about technology solutions. We need to talk about shared mobilities, which is another technological solution. So both the solutions, we have to strengthen both our infrastructure as well as we have to strengthen the technology or provide the technology that allows usage of bicycle. So we work in both the areas. These are some of the designs that we have done. We have designed some protected intersections in our Indian context. We have designed certain kinds of bicycle track. We have designed certain bicycle parking facilities, some protected intersections, then other street furniture along with our normal, the other bicycle tracks and all. These are all part of our different designs. These are detailed design of a stretch where some urban design was planned along with bicycle tracks, with weather protection as well, in intermediate weather protection. Some examples of intersection design. Then some examples where I was talking about, like we have to provide spaces for vendors. Then there is the footpath, and then there is the intermixing zone at the intersection. And then there is the two-way segregated bicycle lane on one side of the road. These are some of the designs that we did earlier for one of our projects. This is where we have got parking systems on this side of the road. The bicycle track goes inside. And then we have got this, this is a pickup drop-off zone where shared mobile cabs can actually come and drop off passengers. So actually our bicycle lane is on the other side. So these are some of the things that we have considered. This is what I was talking about. There is not enough space in Indian roads. We cannot have a footpath. We cannot have a bus shelter along with bicycle tracks altogether. So bicycle track actually has to go along with the buses. So this is one of the, this is not good, but at the same time, there is no other option. What we did in this particular project was instead of having opposite bus stops just on two sides of the road, we staggered the bus stops. We changed the location of the bus stops on two sides of the road. So this was one solution that we gave. So now these are all about infrastructure projects. We also work in the area of technology, and we have been working on bicycle sharing for quite some time now. And I'm happy to say that our research group has made the first Make in India IoT-based bicycle sharing system. So not only did we design our own software for the sharing system, which includes both the user apps as well as the server-side software, but also we made a system so that anybody can start a business using our system. And we also designed the bicycle lock, which is usually imported from China. So this is the first Make in India IoT-based bicycle sharing system. And these are the different kinds of lock that we have designed already. So there's Bluetooth-based lock, there's GPS-based lock, And then we have another lock coming up, which got, we were on the, we are making this, finalizing the prototypes when lockdown happened. So we are waiting for this to get completed. So this is the auto lock, means it will automatically close and open. And this is our system, which is the IoT-based bicycle sharing system. So we are pubs, and our group is called pubs. And over here, you can download this admin apps. And we have got the IoT smart locks, which talks with the admin app. Then there is this is for the operators. So operators can buy our locks or get our locks, and they can install our apps. Using that, they can manage the entire system. And then again, there are end users who can actually log in with the operators and can use any of the cycle. So this is how the entire system operates. And over here, the only thing is we are providing the entire technology, starting from the mobile apps, then the servers, then the locks, all for operators who would like to take the locks from us, and then they will like to start a bicycle sharing system. And they can also customize our locks in hundreds of ways. So you can set lot of times, lot of waiting time, this lot of ride times, then lot of hold out times, how long a person can lock this particular smart lock intermediately, and so on. So all this customization is possible with the locks. So you can be an entrepreneur, you can contact us, and if anybody is interested to be an entrepreneur in bicycle sharing, we would be happy to provide you the entire technology free of cost. So that is what our project is all about, to create Indian our technology, which we will provide it freely to everybody. So this is our user application. You can download it from Google Store as well as from Apple Store. So this is our Pubs app. You have to scan the QR code from the bicycle. Then Bluetooth connection is established with the bicycle. The user can actually talk with the lock using Bluetooth, and then the user can start a ride. Then they can actually hold a ride or end a ride. So hold means actually you lock the ride, but you don't return the bicycle. So there is certain time limits you can set for that. So that would be set by the operator, of course. And then we can customize our application. It's open system for seamless integration of external systems. So this is also possible. Chinese locks can also be integrated in this particular system. So we also have our operation software, which is where IIT Kharagpur is basically the pub system. We can have many public service operators under us, and the service operators can have their own regional offices, zone offices, and then area-wide offices. So all these hierarchies are possible when you use our system. We are also working on fleet management, how to redistribute bicycles. Most of the operators don't redistribute, or they do it manually. So we are also integrating this redistribution solution along with our bicycle sharing software that we are developing for the operators. And then finally, this is a small video of our production. So this is a bicycle lock. You can fit it to any bicycle. This is the lock. It opens automatically, but you have to close on your own. This is the actual production version. This is actually shows our lab where we did our initial prototypes. We did all the software, the hardware, everything has been designed in-house, and we have designed the electronics. We have designed written code for the assembly language code has been written by us as well. So all these things has been done by us. This is where our locks are getting produced. And we are in the testing phase. We are supposed to launch our system when lockdown happened. So we are waiting for the lockdown to get over so that we can start our system in the campus. So once you are using our system, you can also put the lock on hold. Many operators don't allow this, but we have integrated that where you can just park your bicycle. Suppose you're going to a shop, you can park it. You can just lock it. Then automatically this tab comes in where you can hold your bicycle. You put it on hold. You can go to your shop. Then you can return back. You can open it again. You can continue with your ride. It again opens up. So finally, you can return the bicycle. Once you have returned back, like this is in front of our department, you can return and then you can end your ride. So once you end your ride, you will get the amount of money that would be charged, and that will be deducted from your wallet. So that's it. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity for presenting.
Wonderful presentation, Dr. Pandit.
I took a lot of time, I guess. Got lost in the presentation.
No, it was wonderful. It was very good to see the innovations that IIT Kharagpur is known all over the world for. So I'm sure a lot of, just a minute. So we'll move on to the next speaker, Dr. Pandit.
Sure.
Yeah. So Chunli, are you there? Can we have your presentation now? Yeah. Yes. So I'll just introduce you to our viewers first.
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah. So Dr. Chunli Zhao studied architecture and landscape in bachelor's and master's levels. Just a minute. I think we have lost the Chunli.
Can you see my screen now?
Okay, I will just take a moment to introduce you. I will just bring on my screen. Is it okay? I will just a moment.
Sorry, I'm visiting your screen.
Just a moment, right? Yeah. We'll introduce our second speaker to our audience, Dr. Chunli Zhao. Dr. Zhao studied architecture and landscape in bachelor's and master's levels in She received a PhD degree in comprehensive bicycle transport planning from the University of Copenhagen in 2017. She is currently a postdoctoral fellow at K2, the Swedish Knowledge Center for Public Transport. Her main research interest focuses on travel behavior in relation to individual factors, urban form, societal environment, and planning culture. Her ongoing research focuses on users' responses to the service attributes of free-floating bike-sharing scheme, e-scooters, and self-driving shuttle buses, and their potential roles as last-mile solutions for facilitating public transport as a more attractive mode for different social groups. I'd just like to tell the audience that while we were looking for literature, supporting literature for our project, we came across a couple of very interesting papers by her, and one of them was on the comparative assessment of usage of bicycles, electric bicycles in China. Another one was on the intention to switch to private transport, cars. If I'm not mistaken, Chunli. I mean, studying bicycle users if they are willing to switch to cars at a later stage. So a couple of very interesting papers that caught our attention, and so we're very fortunate to have Chunli Zhao with us today. And Chunli, I'll just hand it over to you in a moment.
Thank you. I'll start with sharing my
Yeah,
screen.
you can start your presentation.
First to be sure if everybody can see my screen. Yes.
It's perfect, Chunli.
Can you see it?
Please go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, perfect. First, thank you very much for your invitation, Dr. Gupta, and also for your presentation, Dr. Pandit. That's very interesting. Before I'm going to start my presentation, I give a little bit words about myself. So I'm right now a postdoc at Lund University in Sweden. As Dr. Gupta has been introduced very well about my background, so I'm not going to tell more about it, but I'm affiliated with two organization. One's Lund University, one is Swedish National Knowledge Center for Public Transport. And today I'm going to present one of my study based on the comparison between the infrastructure planning culture in Beijing and Copenhagen. And I made this study during my PhD time back to 2016. Since the time is very limited, so I have tried to make my slides very direct and concise. I hope I will make it in 15 minutes, which is a little bit difficult because it's a very big, a little bit big study to present in 15 minutes, but I will try. As I said, I will not give it too much about background information, why I started about cycling. I go directly to the research backgrounds about question about to promote cycling in the cities in the developing countries. Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you, Chunli. Perfect.
Okay, it was I lost you from okay. So to promote cycling in the cities in developing country, transferring solution from cities with extensive experience may increase the efficiency of solution funding. That's what we like. The question point to how to transfer those solutions efficiently and effectively. For example, this is intersection in the city of Copenhagen. As you all know about Copenhagen as a cycling city, and you can see if you are in Copenhagen, you will see typically this blue cross path for cycling in a lot of intersections. And it's become kind of international applied solution in many cities. It's same as Beijing, for example, they have painted this red cross instead, but you can see the layout, the area, the design has been very different from what.
Chunli, sorry to interrupt you for a moment. A couple of viewers are saying they're not able to hear you properly. Can you just check your microphone, or could you maybe speak up a little bit? I'm able to hear you perfectly though, and I'm hearing you on a headset now, so it seems to be okay.
I think my microphone should be like this.
Yes,
yeah, I will try. Is it better?
It's better now. It's better now. Yes.
Good. I will try to do this.
I'm so sorry for that, but
no worries. Please feel free to just to shout because this technical problem is not that makes sense if people cannot hear and look at screen. Another example is in Copenhagen, we often use the car parking on the road to protect the cycling lanes and cyclists, as you can see. And also Beijing has done this kind of pilot project has been changed a street design exactly as what they have done in Copenhagen. And you can see that even they add a buffer between the car and the cycling lanes in order to prevent the passengers from the car will be hated by the cyclists or cyclists hated by the door of the car. So they have really done some good work, but apparently it did not work that well. So this point to the question is it really something about what Copenhagen has done, then others should apply. So it's not that simple. Based on this background, we initiated this study and questioned on how are the applied design solutions are identified in the cities and how is bicycle infrastructure planning supported by the local planning cultures in the two cities. Of course, the original idea was to find out what lessons can Beijing learn from Copenhagen for improving the bicycle infrastructure planning. For carrying out this study, I took Beijing Copenhagen as the case study, and I will give a brief introduction about Beijing and Copenhagen. And this is Beijing. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Hello?
Chunli. Yes, yes.
I lost you from time to time. Okay, sorry. So this is street in Beijing from 1992, so nearly 30 years ago, and it's street to connect with the center of Beijing. As you can see, there are many cyclists in Beijing at that time. But after about 30 years, and this is the same street as the last picture showed, and you can see there's nearly no bicycles, it's full of the cars, and that's what has changed on the street and in the city. And it's happened because you can see the cycling has been decreased from 62% in 1986 and to today in 2017, I know the figure is nearly about 13%. It decreased a lot, but still, it still like has a bigger share compared with most of the other cities, I would say. Of course, it's accompanied by the growing of the car using and also public transport. And also, it's noticeable that even though the bicycle has been marginalized in the past few years, bicycle, apart from walking, if you can see the trips made within 10 kilometers, you can still say bicycle is the most competitive mode when the travel distance is short enough. And also we have very optimal infrastructure condition, and we have space for building the good infrastructure. But maybe we lack for the management to make it as good as possible. But the conditions are available to compare with lots of European middle-aged cities. For example, space is a problem, that you don't have space for make bicycle lanes. From political will perspective, also the government of China has been set a goal to promote non-motor transport together with the public transport. We call it green transport. It requires each city should have the green transport mode share until 70% by 2020. And for Beijing government, it has been made their own goal, which should be reached to 75%. So political goal is very ambitious. Copenhagen, as you all know, heard about, I guess, is such a successful cycling city, and that's a city profile. And of course, it had to do with very strong political goal, become one of the best cycling cities since 1990s. And also, they have continually effort for improving the bicycle infrastructure, bicycle culture, and also to cultivate the social environment to support the cycling as a transport popular mode, and then have lots of advanced cycling planning for bicycle lanes and for parking space. This is in Danish, but I can tell the name of the document called Prioritized Bicycle Infrastructure Plan, prioritized plan for bicycle parking. So bicycle is really prioritized in the city budget and also in the city projects. A lot of cities would question about, is it comparable between Beijing and Copenhagen, because Beijing is such a mega city. Its population is nearly like 4 times as the population of the whole Denmark and 20 times as Copenhagen. Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes.
Good, perfect. It's just super clear. Okay, I will continue. But when it comes to the cycling, they do share a lot of similarities. For example, both cities has a very strong cycling culture in the historical days and also today. And both cities has a flat topography which is suitable for cycling. And also we have very good conditions for developing good bicycle infrastructure. And when it comes to the trips, as you can see, according to the data in 2014, for example, in Beijing, the average travel distance is 12 kilometers, and Copenhagen is 9 kilometers. But the important number here is in Beijing, there are about 60% of the main trips, commuting trips, is actually shorter than 5 kilometers. And in Copenhagen, there are 50%, 55% of trips are shorter than 5 kilometers. Why is 5 kilometers? Because 5 kilometers, it is a very durable distance for people to travel with bicycle. So there's a big potential for Beijing to increase the bicycle mode share. And the last point is they do share another thing is the political agenda, that they have strong political will for promoting bicycle. Although compared with Copenhagen, Beijing's maybe less strong political will in Beijing, but it is there, so that is also positive. Therefore, this made these two cities comparable. So what I did for this study, I interviewed 11 planners, 6 from Beijing and 5 from Copenhagen. And those planners are either sitting in the municipality of the planning department, both doing administrative work, but also planning work, or they are working in the planning institute or companies as a planning engineer, or they are researchers are working on the cycling planning and all cycling related subjects. So they have very quite similar role in two cities. And the planners in Beijing have been preferred to be presented anonymous. Therefore, you don't see their names and where they're from, but their position, as I have introduced, is quite similar. And they have senior and very experienced knowledge about cycling planning. And what I asked during the interview, to avoid the bias, like I did not apply any designing standard that used in Copenhagen for Beijing. Instead, I select on, I don't know if you know about it, it is internationally recognized design manual for bicycle transport, and it is released by a Dutch organization, the Netherlands, called CRO, which is kind of like a brainstorm, it supports the government policy making in the national level. And there, in this manual, they suggest if you want to make bicycle-friendly infrastructure, you should reach these 5 principles. That is cohesion, safety, directness, attractiveness, and comfort. So in the interview, I was asking the exactly same questions to the planners in 2 cities about what do they think about how important of these 5 principles when they were planning for their infrastructure, and what is the challenges and opportunities or importance for applying those 5 principles in the cities. Because of the time limited, I will only present the result of those first 3 principles to get the main result of this study. And I used a theoretical framework, which is called the culturalized planning model. I'm not going to unfold it here thoroughly because the time limited, but I'm using this as theoretical framework to analyze the interview data, which interpreted the planning culture in 3 layers as planning artifacts, planning environment, and societal environment. So I analyzed the results from these 3 dimensions. First, about cohesion, the both cities have agreed cohesion is one of the most important principles, that we should build a very connected bicycle network with very detailed roads and passes, and they really make a lot of effort for improving the cohesion. Of course, in this case, Copenhagen has already very good connected bicycle cycling infrastructure. Therefore, they are implementing a bit different strategies for improving cohesion. But there's one common challenge has been about the conflicts between cars and bicycle. And in the case of Beijing today, and also in the past days of Copenhagen, it has been appeared that a lot of cars are parked on the bicycle lanes. And it is very interesting how the plans in the 2 cities has been reflected on this problem. Like, for example, in Beijing, the planners say that, okay, the problem will not be solved in the near future. They talk about if we move the cars away, where will they park? And we are afraid of the opposition from the car drivers. They will protest, and we don't want that happen. That's what they were talking about. But however, in Copenhagen, the planner has said that he said we don't have enough car parking space in Copenhagen as well. But that does not imply that we cannot remove car parking. If you want to make the room for cycling facilities, you have to remove the car parking. So it's really about the decisive political will, in his opinion. And then when it comes to the safety, it's another very important principle both cities have agreed on and have been working for many years for improve this safety, and they are applying different strategies, solutions for improve it. But when it comes to reflections, for example, the planners in Copenhagen, they had a lot of discussion about the safety between the perceived safety and actual safety. And come back about this, for take example at this blue cross cycling path in the intersection. There's a researcher in the university has started evaluated that if you have put too many blue cycling cross in the intersections, is actually increase the accident rate. So more people are injured in that case. And this researcher has brought this result study to the city of Copenhagen, but the planners there thinking about we put the blue cross. It's not only about for protecting the cyclists, but also for indicating those people who are cycling and not cycling, that to let them know that we are really taking care of the cyclists, therefore to enhance the perceived safety. And when people perceive it is safe, they are going to cycle. And if we don't perceive it is, if they perceive the road is dangerous, they will not bicycle. Therefore, the planners in the city of Copenhagen, they think it's very important to keep the perceived safety for the cyclists and non-cyclists. Therefore, we should keep this blue cross in the intersections. So they had lots of thorough discussion about it. And the result of the discussion between the researchers and the city planners end up like now, today, if you go to the city of Copenhagen, back to 5 years ago, you will see in the intersection, there are at least 4 cycling cross was painted in each direction. But today, if you go on the street, either there's no blue cross anymore, or there's 1 or maximum 2 bicycle lanes are protected, painted with blue crossing. So that means that it does has made some changes, and they had a lot of reflections, and then they have changed or improved the solutions for the culture, for the infrastructure planning. And what happened for the Red Cross in Beijing, for the planners there, is another chapter, because first they were not clear about why they should or they have painted this red crossing. For example, one of the planner has been involved in the planning system very much. He was asking me, he asked me, do you know why Copenhagen has done such kind of like painted the blue cross in Copenhagen? Because for me, he said that I have this feeling that it's not hitting the right needs. We should rather work on the 2 aspects, that is solving the car parking problem and installing the physical fence. And he thinks this red crossing is just kind of displaying work for the government to show people we are doing something. So what is underlined here to compare the planner's view between the 2 cities is like the implementation of this red cross in Beijing is based on assumption that it will contribute to bicycle-friendly infrastructure because Copenhagen has done so, without knowing why it should have been done that way, and what's the logic or what's the principles behind that. On the other hand, Beijing did not reflect on so much as the planners in Copenhagen. They have reflected on about actual and perceived safety. The third principle is about directness. As the planners in Copenhagen has reflected on that. Consider directness is very important for reducing the travel time, and they think reducing the travel time by bike is the key factor for making a bicycle competitive with other transport mode, because people want to go fast. And the reason, as one planner said, the reason why cycling has such a high number in Copenhagen had to do with the time efficiency, and darkness has a decisive impact on the time efficiency in this case. Therefore, Copenhagen has applied a lot of implementations for improving the directness. For example, building a lot of bicycle bridges. They are also look like very beautiful, like artwork, but also most important is to reduce the distance between the 2 points. And also they have control flows for the one-way street for cars, and they adjust the traffic signals according to the speed of the cyclists. And of course, they also have the bicycle superhighway to cross the rural area and the city for long-distance commuting. This is just some example they have done. And for Beijing planners, when I mentioned about this concept, first the planners were very puzzled. And after I explained what is it, the planner said that, okay, the directness is less important than safety and cohesion. We think safety should be first, then cohesion, then we think about directness in the next step. Another planner said directness was not conceived as a task that it was impossible to apply to Beijing because the existing planning of the road is fixed and cannot be changed. So the underline here is that Beijing did not think about directness or didn't implement any measures for improving directness because the planners in the planning environment, they does not have this kind of belief that it is important to apply the darkness to the infrastructure planning. And therefore, Beijing has not such kind of strategies or effort for improving directness. And it applies the same for the another two principles, which is attractiveness and comfort. But because of the time limited, so I have had those slides, and you are I will not unfold that. And from here, we can summarize about the application of the 5 principles. So in Copenhagen, the 5 principles are well developed and considered equally important. But in Beijing, they now focus on the totally cohesion and safety. And for the rest of the 3 principles, they consider the secondary and even for the future, not for today. So planners in Copenhagen has presented more elaborated thoughts and experience in regarding the application of each principle. Another perspective to look into the result interview is about the social status and the role of the bicycle transport. How it's different in the 2 cities. And for Copenhagen, bicycle is a key element of the future mobility. And the planners in Copenhagen, they tend to have very strong professional identities. They know a lot about what cyclists want and what about good cycling infrastructure should be. And they also connect that even though they were not educated at school, there was no educational program was focused on the cycling planning at their time. But they do have developed strong professionals identities through so many years of experience with aero and the trail. And also they also link to the personal travel priorities. Like all of the planners I have interviewed, they are just proud of traveling with a bicycle every day. Like one planner said, cycling to us is such a relaxed and common thing to do, and I take it for granted that my city has made the facility available and ready for me to bicycle. In Beijing, is another in the opposite. The planners in Beijing are very uncertain with respect to the feasibility and suitability of a bicycle as a travel mode in the city. And cycling is not their personal choice at all for commuting. Most of them are taking either driving or taking public transport. As one planner think, Beijing is such a big city. If people really use the bicycle for their daily transport, I doubt that it would match Beijing's metropolitan status or not. So you can see how differently cycling was perceived in the society, in the planner's eyes. So the conclusion of study is that you can observe the assumption and expose beliefs about the role of the principles shared by the planners and means in the planning environment impact how the principles are considered in the planning process, and consequently it's resulted in the different planning outcomes. That means how the bicycle infrastructure is designed and detailed, maintained and improved. And also the values and the beliefs of the planners are rather rooted in the wider societal environment. When you see how the differences between the two cities, how they consider about the role of bicycle and the image of cycling, and it's contribute to shaping status of the role and of the bicycle transport in the Pacific urban context of two cities. Some brief discussions. So we can see in Copenhagen, gaining experience is fundamental for developing the best design solutions and the planning practices. As I say, they didn't learn that from the education program or school or university because it did not exist at that time when they were studying. So they developed this rather based on experience and later learning. They had a lot of failure experience also in the mentioned during the interview, but they did try the different solutions and arrived at today. And such experience need to be embedded in the local planning environment, where bicycle infrastructure planning should be prioritized in policy and subject to a high degree of support from the surrounding societal environment. If you feel that when I cycling on the street, people will consider me I'm the low social class, or I cannot afford of driving car, you may feel not free to go back. But if you think about, I'm so proud that I'm cycling and everybody in the city is cycling, I'm proud of cycling because it's good for the environment, it's fast, and we are living in such kind of best, like nearly the best cycling city in the world, then of course I'm encouraged to go back. The societal environment is very important to support a positive rule of cycling and therefore to increase the bicycle mode share. And of course, all these factors safeguard the stability and continuity of efficient bicycle infrastructure planning. And as you can see, bicycle infrastructure planning is not just a technical task. It involves connecting planning knowledge and also forms of actions in the planning environment. Otherwise, we just need one perfect design manual for all the cities and then we can do it. And planning culture influences the efficiency of how the planning knowledge and the practice are meditated. And of course, it's important understanding the underlying rationales of the planning principle is crucial for creating the effective bicycle infrastructure. Yeah, that is my study. And if you want to know more about this study, because I have really made it short and direct, and you are welcome to read my paper, which with this title, and I can send it to you later to share with Dr. Gupta if you are interested in. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Chunli. Wonderful presentation.
Thank you.
So, just a question: is this part of some study that you are doing at the moment, or this was conducted some time back?
Sometime back. It's finished now. I did it in 2016.
Okay, is this part of your doctoral dissertation?
Yeah, it's based on my doctoral dissertation. Well, in Denmark, Copenhagen University, our PhD dissertation is composed with single papers. This is one of my papers that's published in my dissertation and also the journal.
Okay, wonderful, wonderful. So I'm sure some of our speakers will be waiting to ask you a few questions, but we'll move on to Professor Cherry now. So please stand by for some more time. I mean, I guess it's going to be half an hour more from here. So we'll just wrap up with a short panel discussion. We'll try to keep that short just to finish it on time. So let's now go on to Professor Cherry. Professor Cherry, just a moment. I will just present your introduction to our audience. Okay, so let me introduce you to Dr. Christopher Cherry. He received his BS and MS in Civil Engineering from the University of Arizona and PhD in Civil and Environmental Engineering from the University of California, Berkeley. His PhD dissertation topic was environmental safety and mobility implications of electric two-wheeler use in China. His primary research areas focus on transportation system impacts from emerging technologies like e-bikes, e-scooters, and shared mobility, on safety, sustainability, health, and mobility. His current research projects include the Me Bike study that looks to leverage smartphones to conduct ad hoc travel surveys to supplement passive data collection, and using machine learning algorithms rather, create the largest and richest data set to support the growth of e-bike use as a transportation option. His past research projects include the Cycle U Share experiment with e-bicycle sharing on the University of Tennessee campus. And Dr. Cherry is involved in a lot of other research also. So I would request our audience to visit his page. I've already shared the details in mail. I have only tried to capture the details which are relevant to bicycling. And I will just let you know this, that when we were looking for literature for our project, particularly, we came across this very interesting paper in which Dr. Cherry was a co-author, where his team worked on simulation of an e-bike sharing system. So they were looking to simulate the performance using some performance parameters. They were trying to see how effective it would be. It was a virtual simulation for a twin hub cycle sharing system for a small area. And we took it as an example. And because of the peculiar situation we are facing now, that we are not able to test our own cycles, we thought that let's try and see what we can learn from that, what we can gain from that, whether we can improve on the simulation aspects in that paper. And we are trying to work on that. And Dr. Cherry, we will just get in touch with you to gain some insights from you on that later also. And just one little thing, just a couple of days back, I came across this very interesting thing, link which just came across. That Dr. Cherry is working on a very interesting project on the effect of COVID-19 on shared micromobility in Nashville in Tennessee. And I think he has, this is a collaborative study with the Portland State University. So they're taking the data from different bike share operators and transit operators, and they're trying to see how COVID-19 has affected travel patterns. And Dr. Cherry will probably let you in on that after his talk or during his talk. So with that, I will just hand it over to Dr. Cherry. Just a minute.
Okay, thank you for the introduction, and also thank you to my pre-presenting colleagues here who were able to help to, I guess, set the stage actually for some of the things I'm going to say. So that's actually is very nice, very cohesive panelists, I think. I look forward to the next one. So thank you, Dr. Pandit and Dr. Zhao, for some great presentations, and thank you, Pramjit, for the introduction to share some of the work we've done and we're doing. I'm going to, again, go fast, and I look forward to the discussion afterwards. But first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen. Okay, there we go. So should be shared now. Please speak up. I can't see anybody on the panel now, so please speak up. If it goes out, so that I'll
be able to see it perfectly.
Okay, great. So what I'm talking about broadly now is how we think about policy approaches to e-bikes and other micromobility. I'm going to kind of blast through the one slide results of several studies. The simulation study that you mentioned is an interesting case, I think. And it's practical tools that we can use to look at bike share. But the umbrella here is this is a light electric vehicle education and research initiative that I'm working on with faculty or with staff and faculty at Monash University in Australia, and also with the Portland State University. And we'll talk about a couple of studies we've done with them. So the big questions that we see, and we see these questions all the time as it relates to e-bikes, are these frequently asked questions you might say, aren't e-bikes cheating? I'd rather people ride bicycles. We can't use health-oriented arguments or funding for lazy e-bike riders. Most environmentally friendly way to go must be by bicycle or electric car. Where do e-bikes fit in? So you hear this sort of thing. Aren't e-bikes too fast? Can they be part of a so-called Vision Zero safety strategy? Will personally owned e-bikes be obsolete with bike shares, shared scooters, or other technologies? So these are the types of questions that we hear. So we try to generate research responses to these that are evidence-based and so on. So these are skeptics, of course. But you always have to answer the question related to people who see new technology as an incumbent that may not have a good benefit. And I think that it's important to ask those questions in very honest ways. But what we did is we looked at e-bike mobility, okay? And e-bike, I italicize mobility here as kind of one of the main benefits of e-bikes. They're providing access to destinations. They're providing door-to-door mobility between destinations. And they also provide potentially another benefit, and that's the first benefit. That's a health benefit. They provide physical activity. So even if they provide no mobility effects, that is, people ride them in circles for hours and start where they ended, they'll still provide a health benefit. Now, the other two are kind of costs, okay? So they use energy just like every motorized mode of transportation or every piece of exercise equipment for that matter. And also they have a safety impact. And the big question for number 2 and 3 is what is the kind of net impact, or what's the net effect of energy and safety? So what we do is we try to understand all of this based on this notion of substituted vehicle miles traveled. So what I'm going to do with the rest of the presentation here to walk you through is I'm going to look at each of these 3 indicators of impact, I guess you might say. And I'm going to look at it in the U.S. context, but also talk a little bit about China and some of the interesting things we found there. And then I'm going to pivot a little and talk about disruptions that are occurring. So one big disruption, of course, is other forms of shared technology, shared micromobility. And then the last big disruption that we're all living in now is COVID-19. So that's where we're going to go, and we're going to go kind of quickly through this, but you can hopefully see the picture as we move on. And certainly any of the papers, any of the findings from this, I'd be happy to share. So the first big picture is we're trying to understand how people use e-bikes. Are they toys? Are they exercise equipment? Are they modes of transportation? And what we've done is we did a big e-bike user survey, and this is with the NITC. This is with Portland State University, and you can see the funders on the bottom. But we did a survey of about 1,700 e-bike owners, 1,800 e-bike owners in the U.S., and you can see the map of the U.S. here, a typical kind of population pattern, so a pretty decent representation. And what we found is that most people use e-bikes for commuting, and this is really important. And one of the things that's also very important about this is that people also use e-bikes for recreation. So bicycling and e-bikes and, let's say, scooters or anything else, they're one of these really interesting modes of transportation where they are equally used for recreation and utility purposes, let's say, or they kind of cross modes of use. I ride a bicycle to work, and when I do, I also get my exercise. I also clear my mind, so there's added benefits that other modes don't generally provide, which is kind of a unique thing to bicycling. Okay, so commuting to school or work is an important element here, and recreation has a couple of high points here on respondents with physical limitations or older respondents. So you can see those two. So if you have an injury or if you're older, you might use e-bike for recreation more. It might enable you to get exercise and recreate, whereas younger respondents or not physically limited respondents use it more utilitarian purposes, okay? We asked this question about the last 3 times you used an e-bike, how would you have gotten around instead? Drive alone is one of the main drivers here, okay? A third of all trips are drive alone trips. That's really important when we start talking about the kind of net impact to these others. And then this bottom row here is the recreation trips. So they wouldn't have recreated, or they wouldn't have taken that trip for their recreation. So when you take out that bottom row, driving alone is a massive share of the utilitarian type of trips. So we estimated this vehicle miles traveled displaced by mode, and automobile travel substitutes about 40% of all trips. If you only look at the first 2 columns and compare those, it's even higher. It's about 65% of all trips, okay? And so that's a really important finding, I think. So when we think about energy, we think about health and physical activity, we think about safety, that automobile substitute is really an important aspect of that. So we're going to talk about these 3 really quickly. Health. E-bikes are really a form of active transportation, are they? And the answer is yes. The e-bike is this this green line here, and this is the amount of physical activity essentially that is consumed over a 4 kilometer course. So blue is walking, green is e-bikes, and then red is bicycling. And the thing with bicycling is the reason people don't bicycle is most people don't like to enter into this so-called vigorous physical activity state when they're going to work, for example. And so what the e-bike does is it moderates some of that level of physical activity. So this is one example. Yi Wen is a student of mine who's online now. We're doing this with scooters, and we're finding scooters are a little bit below the blue line. So these are the stand-on electric scooters that are so popular in Europe and the US right now. But they still provide some physical activity, a little less than walking, okay? Sustainability, we find that e-bikes are on the bottom. They're about 1/10 of even an electric car. And they're about 1/20 of a gasoline car in terms of environmental sustainability or greenhouse gas emissions and energy. There are some issues that need to be addressed: lead pollution, lithium ion batteries, same sort of things that are throughout the industrial supply chain. And so from a pure energy movement to movement ratio, essentially, e-bikes are supreme, okay? Almost all of the energy is moving a person, not a vehicle, and they're using perhaps the most efficient drive system that exists, an electric drive system and a human hybrid electric drive system in most e-bikes in the US. Even just the throttle e-bikes or the throttle scooters that are 100% turn the throttle, you don't get physical activity benefits from that, but even those, the energy use is even very small, okay? And then safety. There's a few safety studies that have come out. We have a white paper that we wrote for People for Bikes about a year ago that looks at all the review of all the safety studies that have come out. In short, e-bikes go faster than bicycles. These are sort of the Western experience. This is excluding the China experience. But the safety data doesn't show a big difference, okay? And that's the takeaway message for what we might say are class 1 electric bikes. These are 20 mile per hour or 30 kilometer per hour, 25 to 30 kilometer per hour electric bikes. And they're not necessarily different. There's a couple of interesting little findings about dismounting injuries, older person injuries, whether a car driver perceives the cyclist in a certain way. But overall, they're about the same as a bicycle. And these are, again, Western style e-bikes, not necessarily the one. And there's a whole literature on the China experience too, the scooters. So With bike share, we mentioned our bike sharing experiment, Cycle Use Share. That's the top right. That was an experiment we ran in 2011 and 12 and into 13. And so that was one of the first electric bike sharing systems in the world, if not the first. And we had it as a research platform. We collected a lot of data, but then that essentially the concept was commercialized. Bewegung is the one on the left here, and more recently Jump and others are commercializing this technology. And of course, IoT type of technology has evolved a lot since 2010 and 11. So what you end up with is great data. And I think this is one of the great opportunities and maybe challenges with e-bikes and e-bike sharing and e-scooter sharing is you end up with wonderful amounts of data to identify how and where people go. Some of those, Dr. Zhao was mentioning some of the questions about directness and other things, all lead to this question of what people can tolerate, what they want to tolerate, how they actually perform and behave on the transportation system. So that's some of the things that we're doing in Knoxville at UT. Okay, so for example, with the Baltimore data, we're measuring how fast e-bike riders ride relative to conventional bike riders on what types of infrastructure. For example, we have, you might say, industrial type of car-centric lanes, infrastructure rather. On the right, e-bike riders ride much faster on those relative to bicycle riders. They actually exploit the power of the e-bike, whereas urban core network, like the one on the left, you end up with a lot less kind of speed differential, even in mixed traffic. So e-bike riders are comfortable going a slower speed there. So I'm going to pivot really quickly to e-micromobility. And this is it a fad or a disruptor? COVID-19 is putting a lot of pressure on these fledgling companies. This is a year-old headlines. There's been another year of headlines. Jump was bought by Uber, and then Uber just bought a big sort of stake in Lime, which kind of transformed the Jump brand into the Lime brand. So there's a lot of shakeup. There's a lot of mergers and so on. And I think that's generally probably healthy for the industry. But there's going to be a lot of interesting future for e-micromobility. So the point I want to make with this slide is that the next sort of wave of technology could kind of disrupt the entire system. Okay, it could disrupt how people adopt personal modes. COVID might disrupt it even more. And what we see here, for example, is we've been doing the surveys of e-bike users in Kunming, China for a long time, since 2006, every 2 years. And you can see that kind of bicycling as a mode of substitution has been diminishing. Transit's always been very high mode of substitution. But car use and car type modes have gone up until they plateaued in essentially the 14 to 18 realm. The biggest disruptor in this chart is this one on the far right, where bike share, this is dockless bike share in 2018, became a massive kind of competitor against personally owned e-bikes. And so that's something that's really important to keep track of and understand moving forward. Okay, so let me keep going. We have this MeBike study that Pramdeep mentioned, and the idea with this one is we're actually tracing individual trip level performance of e-bike users. And because of that, we're able to get all kinds of information about mode substitution, about trip purpose for all trips, not just ones they remembered or recalled in a survey. I think this is really important. And then trip rate, of course, is really important too. We're trying to understand the substitution pattern of e-bikes. So I'm going to just change the word here. E-scooters. Aren't e-scooters cheating? Aren't e-scooters unhealthy, environmentally poor, too fast, unsafe, and so on? Okay, so this is a point I want to make, and it follows on Dr. Zhao's point really carefully, is that China has had e-bike and bicycle and e-scooter or whatever else technology throughout its history, starting with bicycling and the kingdom of bicycles. And they've always had essentially what you might say is world-class bicycle infrastructure, okay? And it's always had this, and I think there's this apt discussion of perception of status and so on. And that all kind of filtered through a government, 5-year plans in the early 2000s, where there was a massive focus on infrastructure building for cars at the expense of essentially bicycle infrastructure. Some cities, especially the pro e-bike cities, not Beijing, allowed e-bikes to fill their bike lanes even as bicycling diminished. And what you still ended up with was a critical mass of bicycle riders, or let's say two-wheeler riders in the bicycle lane. Good design, good management of the system by design. And you ended up with, so imagine this group of riders on the left here, and imagine if a third or so of them were in their own personal cars. What would that be for transportation? Would you be able to you would not be able to build enough infrastructure to support these riders as car drivers, okay? And so that's kind of the key takeaway is you have a situation here where you had a pro light electric, light mobility city, which actually maintained the system. So because of that, you end up with when bike share came along a couple of years ago, 2-3 years ago, Mobike and those and the others, you had infrastructure in place that sustained this level of volume. Okay, so many more people are moving by two wheels on this corridor than by car. Just the volume of flow of people is sensational. Okay, and so I think that that's the important piece. And then you look at other cities that have dismantled their bicycle infrastructure. Here, of course, on the right is Beijing. And this lane used to be solely, the entire cross-section of this right side, the entire lane in the picture, used to be solely a bicycle lane. And then they needed parking. So before they needed parking, they wanted more vehicle travel. So they kept the left side of the lane as vehicle travel, and the right side of the lane became bicycle lane. And then, of course, all those vehicles needed to park. So then they continually erode bicycle comfort, bicycle connectness, everything that we just heard about in the Crow manual directly, okay? And what you end up with is poor bicycling counts. It's a causation scenario, okay? Where you take away comfortable infrastructure and then you wonder why bicyclists disappear, okay? All right, so the idea with the low impact transportation lane in China is that you have something like Kunming as a pro-lit city, and it benefits all comers, latecomers, micromobility, dockless, docked, bike share, e-bike share, e-moped share, mini electric vehicles, and this. And this is, I think, the future of transportation. I'm going to go through these because the idea here is nothing, we're having the same debates about scooters now as we had about e-bikes in China. You can read the headlines, and they're about a decade apart, right? Essentially. Okay, now to COVID, just real quick. We do have this ongoing survey. We've launched a big survey in 2 transit cities, Portland and Nashville. Some of the key takeaways here: in the last 7 days, have you reduced public transit trips? We're getting a travel diary type of result here. About 44% of our respondents, this is Portland, said they have reduced their public transit trips and not taken other trips. And then another 40% have reduced their transit trips and replaced them by other trips. And we look at the other trips, other modes, other means of travel, you end up seeing that cars and carpooling is the biggest substitute, followed by walking and then personal bike. The other ones, bike share, scooter share, are somewhat irrelevant. Actually, that's surprising. I thought those would be more relevant. Now, as COVID transforms, we're going to ask these same people in a couple of weeks. This is a panel survey, and we're going to find out something else. Similarly, our Me Bike study has this other one, and this left side, most of our users were commuters, and to the right side now they're using their e-bikes less for commuting and more for social and recreation. So you just see how the trip purpose has changed. The volume of travel has not necessarily gone down too much. Commuters used to be commuters are now traveling a little bit less, but there's still a high volume of recreation and social errands. And if you look at the sales data in the U.S. for bicycling, it's through the roof. All bike shops are sold out, and so on. So that's a key takeaway: safety, health, sustainability. E-bikes rule. Obviously, there are issues that you have to address with all of those, with e-bikes and e-scooters or whatever micromobility comes out. But in a kind of a post-COVID world, for personal mobility, even shared personal mobility, there's not many modes of transportation that provide the mobility benefits at a low speed, safe, low environmental emissions, and healthy way as e-bikes or other light electric vehicles. So that's it. You can reach out to me at the information to the right: Twitter, email, LinkedIn. Micromobility oriented students that worked on the projects here were Moshe Azad, Yi Wen, Nitesh Shah, Casey Langford's a former student, and then John MacArthur and Mike McQueen at Portland State collaborate with a lot of this with me. So with that, I'll jump off and we can move on to the next. Okay, thank you.
Okay, Professor Cherry, that was great. I mean, we got to see so many things, first-hand research which you're conducting. That was fantastic. So we'll definitely keep in touch with you, and just stay on for some more time, please. We have overshot the time limit. We'll just have our last speaker for the day, but probably one of the most important in the sense that so long, we were having the researcher's perspective. Now we are going to have the operator's perspective. So I would like to bring in Sanyam Gandhi now. I'll just present my screen and introduce our audience to Sanyam. Okay, so Sanyam is the Chief Executive Officer of Chartered Bike, a smart bike sharing company in India. Those from our school in Bhopal would know this very well. Chartered Bike operates a fleet of smart bikes. The bicycle sharing system of Bhopal has been in the news in the country for some time. And we were also in discussion about how to really improve it, or what can be done to really give it a new dimension. So Sanyam holds a BSc in Mechanical Engineering from the Karlsruhe Institute of Technology. And his venture is responsible for implementing and operating the pan-city bike-sharing projects, not just in Bhopal, they also operated in Surat and Ranchi in India. So we would like to know from Sanyam firsthand, what are the challenges and opportunities that he perceives the bicycle sharing business generally in India at the moment, and of course with the threat of COVID-19, what are the things that he would like researchers to focus on? And of course, if we can get something, if some of our research can actually help out the bike share operators, that will be our pleasure. So I will just hand it over to Sanyam.
Hi, sir. Am I audible?
Yeah, you're audible.
Okay, I'm going to present my screen. Just a second. Okay. Are you able to see my presentation?
It's coming on. Not yet. It's not visible yet. Yes, you can see it now.
All right. So actually, I'm based in Ahmedabad, but it is currently, one of the biggest hotspots for COVID in India. So I came to the countryside in Rajasthan, where I was born, and there's a lot of crickets and birds chirping in the background. So don't, like, if there's too much noise, just tell me, okay?
There is a little
Alright,
bit of
so-
feedback, but I think it's okay. You can carry on.
Okay. So Chartered Bike was founded by me 3 years back, and it currently operates in 4 cities. It's Bhopal, Surat, Ranchi, and we just also got the project for Newtown, Kolkata, which Dr. Pandit has worked on. A little bit about the parent. So Chartered Bike is owned by the company called Chartered Speed, and it's also one of the leading passenger mobility companies in India. We move almost 350,000 passengers daily. I mean, we used to till COVID hit, and we are also operating DIT projects in Ahmedabad, Surat, Indore, and intercity coaches all across India. So I'm just going to go through what will be the impacts of COVID-19, especially on the Indian context. And from what I've heard from all the consultants and the different cities, is that it's a very, it's a varied response from each person. So I've heard things from, there's consultants in Ahmedabad which are talking about how micromobility will start affecting mass transit now, because all the mass transit is shut, and a lot of passengers from the mass transit will shift to micromobility. And that's not, on a city perspective, it might not be as great as getting a personal vehicle rider to get to micromobility, because they're essentially losing passenger transport users, and it's not affecting the vehicle crisis or the congestion crisis in the city. But then there's also cities like Bhopal, which I talked to the CEO yesterday, and he was very confident about how bike sharing is going to supplement the mass transit. So in the medium period, it might be the only sort of public transport that's open, but in future that will also lead to helping the mass transit scenario in the city. There's also, we talked to a few users in our other cities. So for example, Surat has a very high ridership for our perspective. So we have about 3,000 to 3,500 rides per day, and a lot of the users are now considering buying new bicycles because they've got hooked to using bicycles as a commute, as for their commute. And given the impact of COVID, they're not necessarily sure whether or not the right kind of sanitization procedures will be taken care of, or even if the sanitization procedures are taken care of, there are some hotspots in the city where the bicycles might go. So they're rightly afraid, and that's why they might actually focus on buying their own bicycles. But eventually, I still think this would be a good influence for bicycling in the city, which would, if not in the short term, in the medium to long term, it will help the bike sharing scenario in the city. And I also, we were looking at the difference between cities. So depending on the demographic or the purchasing power, so we operate in a city like Ranchi, where the purchasing power is much lower than that of Surat. So there we might not see the shift from shared bicycles to personal bicycles, because shared bicycles are currently the cheapest mode of transport there. And in fact, COVID-19 would eventually help or in fact boost the PBS scenario in Ranchi a lot. A lot of users are already, getting ready to start using the bicycles as soon as we get a timeline from the city on when we could, start the bicycle sharing system. We're also, in this time, a lot of cities are now approaching us. For example, Raipur is approaching us that they want to implement a bike sharing system. So that's, very encouraging, because people are taking this COVID-19 and turning it into a positive momentum. When you implement a project, there's a lot of new jobs that are created, a lot of new infrastructure is created, a lot of money actually goes back to the citizens. So that's good for the cities, and in fact to recover from the economic crisis that we're in. And again, there will be a lot of new uptake. So a lot of people will start using bicycle sharing. Not necessarily like the personal mobility, like cars, not necessarily all those people will come to bike sharing, but a lot of people from public transport are going to come to public bicycle sharing. So it's not the best scenario for the cities, but in the medium to long term, if bicycle sharing, really gets going in India, personal mobility will reduce a lot. Of course, there will be additional costs. So we are looking at, one sanitizer per bike, almost to be replenished every week. And then we're looking at sanitizing each and every bike every day. We are looking at, chambers where we can, move the bicycle through so that it gets completely sanitized. So all of these additional costs are going to be borne by bike sharing operators. For a company like us, it is a little bit easier because we work with cities and municipalities, and they also help us with a lot of these things. But for example, the startups in this space, which are completely reliant on fare box revenue, they might actually feel the pinch due to these additional costs. So a lot of new innovations will be required. For example, I have seen in a lot of articles, and we're also working on this, is how to incentivize the user to sanitize the bike before he gets on the bike. So it could be, bring your own sanitizers or bring your own gloves. Things like that will really help. If your customers are that knowledgeable and effective in doing this, there'll be a lot of trust created for the other users as well. So it's a 1+. So if I am sanitizing my bikes daily and I see another person doing it, then I get real confidence in the system. Then I've seen a lot of innovations for essential service workers. So a lot of the bike sharing operators are creating these sign-up pages where essential service workers like nurses, like doctors, they can sign up and all their rides are free because of this. In this time, they are the real help that we're getting in this time. Again, sanitizing chambers is something that I touched upon. There'll be greater involvement of municipalities. So although we have our own standard operating procedures, a lot of things needs to be standardized. For example, what kind of disinfectants need to be used, depending on whether or not it can affect maybe the skin of a user or something like that. And then very important is contact tracing and the sharing of data. So it is very much possible in planes and airlines to actually do the contact tracing, because PNRs are generated and it's very easy to go to a single person and then find out that okay, these many people were sitting around him. But when we talk about PBS, God forbid if there's a case that comes up, the contact tracing will be a little bit difficult because you don't know how many people have been around that bicycle, because it's not just the people that use it, but it's also people that rent the bicycles right next to the bicycle that's parked. So a lot of data sharing is required between municipalities and the operators, and it would really help in fighting this crisis. And it's very important at this point in time. And there are certain, opportunities in this time that can be looked at for potential businesses. So there'll be sanitizers on each bike. So of course, sanitizer is something that's getting used everywhere. But we saw there's a nanoseptic surface there's a brand called Wheels, which does e-bikes. and they're using nanoseptic surfaces on the handles which clean or disinfect themselves. So that's a really nice innovation, leading to a new business opportunity. Of course, we will need to disinfect all the stations and bicycles daily. So services for disinfecting can get a boost in this time. We of course also see that city authorities, well, actually I meant promoting the use of micromobility. So city authorities, if they promote micromobility in this point in time, because a lot of confidence has been lost. So a lot of users are not confident to use anything that's shared because it's a virus, so you can get contacted at any point in time. So if city authorities help us promote the use of micromobility, it will generate a lot of confidence in the users. And as operators, we will of course do everything in our hands to sanitize the bikes and keep the system very safe. Of course, bicycle sharing is still cost effective, and cost effective is something that would be very necessary after this crisis, because people will be looking at budget cuts. A lot of companies are looking at employee transportation cuts, so they're targeting whatever excess they have in their companies, and hence cost effective will be one of the major themes going forward. So bike sharing has a role to play there, and we were seeing a larger shift to e-bikes.
Say, I'm sorry to interrupt. Can you just
Yeah.
check your volume? Can you just check? Or can you just bring up your mic a little bit closer to your mouth, if it's possible?
Okay, second.
We lost your presentation. Can you just?
Yeah. Wait, I'll just move my laptop a little bit closer. Is it better now?
Yes, I think so.
Hello?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, I'm just going to speak a little bit louder.
Yeah.
Where was it that you lost me?
Yes, we were on this one. Yes.
Okay. So, bike sharing is still cost effective, and cost effective will be one of the major themes going forward. And a lot of companies, a lot of people themselves are going to cut their costs. So bike sharing is going to be a cost effective strategy for them, and it has a major role to play in their transportation. Then there was a shift to e-bikes before this happened, but now I think it is going to get accelerated. As I touched upon, a lot of public transport trips are now going to be lost because of the crisis. So a lot of people will stop using public transport or try to avoid it. So e-bikes have a bigger role to play because the trip lengths are much larger when compared to normal bicycles. So e-bikes will have a larger role to play in this, and so the shift will get accelerated. And as we the new projects that are coming up, so Newtown Kolkata is a project that we're doing. It will be completely e-bicycles. There will be no normal bicycles there, and that's the scenario we're seeing from a lot of cities now. Again, there's opportunities for the cities to invest in the recovery of the economy. If you invest that money on infrastructure related to micromobility and bicycle lanes, that would be a real positive use of money. And in fact, it will help both in the short and the long term. So that is something that cities could look at. And if we don't put attention to this at this point in time, the shift that has been happening, there's been a positive shift happening towards sustainable mobility, towards shared mobility, towards public transport. All of that could be undone. Given the crisis, a lot of the things that help us with battling global warming and all the congestion problems and the urban problems could be undone, because the crisis has really affected the confidence of so many users, and they're really afraid to get in contact with anyone, and that is the entire conundrum there, whether or not you still invest a lot in public transport, knowing that you will lose money, but it is the right strategy for the medium and long term. In the short term, you might lose money, but it is good to gain confidence from the customers right now, from the citizens right now, that the buses are not crowded, so double the buses to promote micro mobility. So things like that will really go a long way. But if it's not done, the shift or the all the positive momentum that we had could actually get undone. And actually, that's all from my side. Thank you.
Wonderful, Sanyam. You highlighted the challenges very well, and we will be having actually one more. We are planning one more discussion session with public bicycle sharing operators actually this week. So I was discussing that with you. So if you're available, please join us. I'll let you know the details afterwards. So with that, we have heard all our speakers, and now I would just let you in on some of the questions that were. I think we are experiencing some display. Okay, just a minute. Just be there with me. Yeah. Am I visible? Okay. So I will just let you in on some of the questions. We'll try to keep it very short. These were asked by our participants while they were registering, and so I've just tried to go through them and just club them together. There were quite a few questions which were actually in the Indian context, and that I would like to bring up. First of all, there was one very interesting question by Professor Vinayak Chaudhary, the head of the Department of Transportation Planning at our school. He asked whether this quarter-hour city proposed by the mayor of Paris is practicable in the Indian scenario. We would like to see what maybe Dr. Devapratim Pandit thinks about that. Some of the other things which have been debated quite a lot in the Indian context. What is the effect of climate, social aspirations generally, and the relatively longer trip lengths? Are these not deterrents to bicycle use? So will they not still be weighing down on potential users? So will the situation be altered in the current pandemic scenario, given these restrictions, given these constraints rather? And then there was another question regarding whether we should stick to, in India specifically, whether we should stick to building cycling infrastructure to cities and towns where the climate is suitable. So a lot of questions on climate, because it's we have really hot summers. Even today, I think we were having around 45 degrees Celsius in Bhopal. So how do we go about that? So maybe Sanyam can also throw some light on that. The public bicycle sharing kind of provides some solutions to that. And of course, regarding the heterogeneous traffic conditions, most of the cities don't have proper bicycling infrastructure. So is that not a deterrent? So with COVID, without COVID, is that not a deterrent? So, do we build the infrastructure first? And if we do decide to build it, where and how much do we build it? So, because one question also came that is it wise to spend public money on building bicycling infrastructure? That's a very interesting question. So maybe we could just discuss, take these things into consideration while we are discussing for maybe first 5 minutes. Then I'll just throw some of the other things which were asked to us. So let's start the discussion, shall we? Dr. Pandit, can you just start with that one?
Which one? There's so many questions.
Okay. Yeah, the quarter-hour city. I mean, have you? I guess you've heard of it. You must have heard of it. It probably talks about the compact city. It kind of revolves around the compact city concept. I guess. So, is there room for that? I mean, is there a possibility for replicating that model or building something like that, doing something like that in Indian context?
Which one? I couldn't get that.
Just a minute.
Could you repeat once more?
Yeah, I'm talking about the quarter-hour city proposed by the mayor of Paris. Is it practicable in the Indian scenario?
Probably I'm not aware, but is it about compact city? Is it suggesting a compact city? Or?
Yes.
So,
that is. Yes.
I think, it's not a that easy decision to take, because land use transportation models, land use transportation planners have been working on this question for such a long time. And it's very difficult to say if, a smaller compact city is a better solution or a city which is, very, very spread out, it's going to be a better solution. For the time being, I think looking at the perspective from the, from the COVID's context, probably many people are saying that, well, we should build cities which should be, infection proof. So that actually requires us to be more, spread out. But at the same time, you need to understand the cost versus benefit. When you spread out, then you will create a lot of other problems. Now, is it really going to be a good solution? So instead, why don't we design our infrastructure in such a way so that we create those opportunities to provide those kind of social distancing opportunities and all. For example, in any design, for example, like when we do bus service design, like we develop a lot of softwares on bus transit system. So the basic concept is level of service. So there is level of service A, level of service B, level of service C. So usually the designs in India is around a level of service D. So if you want to make it level of service A or B, automatically you can do social distancing. But the problem is, can you afford that amount of money? Because when you are saying level of service A, automatically you have to provide a service where a bus comes every 5 minutes, takes around 20 passengers. So is it feasible to pay for that kind of, are the passengers will be able to pay that kind of money? Like you cannot double tickets. Like for example, we were facing this problem in West Bengal. Our chief minister said that, well, all the private buses should be opened during this situation. And the private operators simply said, we are not going to open any buses because the reason is we are not going to make money when you are running it with 20 passengers. And so now they've said to make it 30 passengers. And even so, that is not working. You have to make it for almost, you have to open the government bus service. So you see that, there are always, cost issues. So at the end of the day, India, started with full lockdown, but now we are opening up. Why? Because of cost, because of economy. You have to start the economy. So that is where my answer is, you have to find the right balance between economy as well as, the benefit, whatever benefit it gets. So in this case, I think it is loaded more towards the complexity because it's not only gives us economy, but also gives us a lot of environmental benefits, which would have been lost if I only considered the situation in this COVID, this pandemic. So I think that is one of my answers. I think others can also, answer this question.
Yeah, if maybe any of the others would like to go for it. Or maybe I will ask Sanyam this one question. When so many people, when so many of our participants were actually pointing out to, they were flagging climate and social aspirations and the relatively longer trip lengths in India, and even somebody was actually questioning or maybe rather asking whether it's wise to invest in infrastructure in all cities in India, bicycling infrastructure. So from the point of view of public bicycle sharing, does it offer the kind of solutions? Can it actually, can it help to overcome these constraints? What's your take on it?
Yeah, so the question is very genuine because the climate in a lot of the cities in India does not support any sort of bicycling. But there is some truth to the fact that majority of our travel is either before 10 o'clock or after 4 o'clock, which is not the peak time of heat. And secondly, public transport is essential. Micromobility adds on to it. So you cannot replace the entire public transport using micromobility. You can assist it in a lot of ways. You can assist it, in smaller proportions, and you can assist it in very large proportions as well. But the majority of trip lengths and trip times for micromobility is much lower, and also at times when there's not the peak heat. So what we see of course, in cities which are cooler, so Ranchi has an average temperature of about 26 degrees to 30 degrees. And we see much higher ridership there than compared to, Bhopal. So climate does have an effect, but it's also the kind of the city there is. So Ranchi has a denser population and a shorter city length. So we see a lot more of trips which are, less than 15 minutes. But in Bhopal, where a lot of trips are used for recreation, the average trip time is about 42 minutes. And the trip length is also much larger, where the density is lower in the area that we have implemented the project. So climate does have a play, but depending on what kind of effect you want to have in the city, you can plan accordingly.
Okay, now Professor Cherry, I was just wondering, looking at these questions, and something I personally would also like to ask. Do you feel infrastructure is of paramount importance? Is that the most important consideration that we need to have when we are talking about bicycle use, to promote bicycles in cities, in places where maybe the uptake is there's not so much of a cycling culture. So does infrastructure have to always come first, and especially if you're talking of, say, rural areas, where it won't make sense maybe to invest a lot of infrastructure? So does it work without infrastructure also? What's your view on that?
Yeah, so good question. I'm of the opinion, and I'm a civil engineer, so I see the world through the lens of infrastructure, that you need everything, of course. You need education, you need enforcement, you need programs, you need technology, and so on. You need good land use that supports bicycling, for example. But infrastructure solves a lot of the overcomes a lot of the barriers, let's say, in my mind, that are placed in many cities. And it doesn't have to be heavy infrastructure. It can be subtle, lightweight infrastructure. It has to be visible, but it doesn't have to be a protected bike lane on every roadway. A lot of the discussion that's had now is that we should have very good infrastructure, very high quality infrastructure on high volume corridors. But a lot of it has to do with simply prioritizing non-motorized, equitable travel over cars on specific corridors. We're seeing that with the COVID response. Oakland, California has, some would say closed, some would say opened about 10% of their streets for non-motorized transportation. This is infrastructure that already is there, okay? It's not new infrastructure. It's infrastructure that has been closed to cars and opened for everyone else. I think looking at Indian cities, traveling through Indian cities, there's such a rich, dense network of infrastructure already that every corridor doesn't have to be a high quality multimodal corridor, but there has to be a network of non-motorized roadways that are prioritized for pedestrians and for bicyclists. And whether that means motorcycles and cars are excluded or not, that's a design and management question. So infrastructure is fundamental. You have to have low stress infrastructure and a network of low stress infrastructure. Without brakes and without arterial roadways crossing through and everything else. And when you do have those places, you have to do those ones perfectly. You have to build them high quality, more expensive, and so on. City of Portland has a extensive, which is the bicycling capital of the U.S., which is not a major thing to say necessarily, but they have an extensive green, quiet street network through neighborhoods where it's very comfortable to ride a bicycle across the city, and it's very low tech, very low impact design. I mean, it's intentional, it's careful, but it doesn't cost tens of millions of dollars, let's say. Okay.
Great opinion, Professor Cherry. I would now like to ask Chun-Li one particular question which we got during the webinar on chat. Somewhere you mentioned that 60% of all the trips below 5 kilometers were cycle trips in Beijing, if I'm not mistaken. So the question was, what about the rest 40%? I mean, is there a social reason? I mean, so the broader question would probably be, do social factors matter, and to what extent? What extent would these social factors, kind of like there are so many subjective factors. One of the things which I'm also working on for my research. So, to what extent do these things play a role? So, can you say something on that?
Of the 40%?
Yeah. I mean, you can take it generally. It was an observation that what you mentioned in your presentation was that 60% of all the trips below 5 kilometers were on cycles. So what about the remaining 40%?
No, they are not 60% of them on cycling. 6% are, so for the trips under 5 kilometers, about 60% are using walking, and then 15% for cycling.
Okay. Maybe I just.
So maybe there was a misunderstanding.
Okay, then. But generally speaking, what do you feel? I mean, do subjective factors, to what extent would subjective factors matter? What is the role of social norms? I mean, any views on that?
Yeah, because I also have some other studying about social norms and attitudes, and in that study, it did not show so that much, because nowadays it's so different than if back to 10 years ago. For example, nowadays there are a lot of young people that really appreciate the way living like environmental, and they don't really associate social status with the transport mode you are traveling with. So obviously nowadays today, people don't consider cycling as connected with like low social class anymore, or especially with this bike sharing system has been boomed in China. It's not that such how to say, they don't have this kind of subjective, not prejudice, but opinion, have a negative attitude to the bicycle, I would say, in Chinese cities. And in the European, like for example, in Copenhagen, in Denmark, and in Sweden, this social or subject factor is not really a problem at all for people to take bike or not. If all is in a more positive way, like people are proud of taking bicycle, and to be part of others, like who is taking bike, and like that.
Okay, that's a good insight coming from Dr. Chun-Li Zhao. Well, I think we have asked the question specific, to the Indian context, a lot of things. And then there were some general questions. One was how do we carry forward the gains that we seem to have, reaped in these COVID times? Some of the cities are trying to bring in bicycling, promote bicycling in a major way. There are pop-up bicycling lanes coming up, different cities like Bogota, Paris, maybe cities in Germany, in Auckland. They're trying to create the space. They're trying to induce people into bicycling. So how do we sustain these gains? Any one of our speakers, could you
how do we sustain these gains?
How do we sustain these gains?
Maybe someone to start, Chris.
For the Chris here, I think for me, the question, everybody I've seen about these pop-up bike lanes, pop-up bike corridors, everything else has at least publicly tried hard not to portray that these are permanent gain or permanent, transformations of motorized infrastructure. I think it's going to be really challenging when car travel comes back to North American cities, and it's going to come back at a higher rate because more people are driving now or not taking transit. There's going to be a lot of political pressure to expand roadways, to do everything we've been doing to accommodate single occupant car drivers. And so that'll be moderated a little bit in my mind by high unemployment and the economic hole that we're in. But eventually it's going to come back, and I'm not sure transit's going to have to do a lot of work to win riders back, I think, or we're going to have to get to a place where we're very comfortable with coronavirus before our economy comes back, if we're going to do that. So I think that we're winning a lot of bicyclists right now, whether it's recreational bicyclists or whatever else. And there's people who haven't been on bicycles for years or using bike share who haven't ridden for years, who are suddenly new advocates, new interest groups. The key is these are inexperienced riders. They're not the person with the Lycra suits that we saw in some pictures, right? And they need to have infrastructure that is the 880, right? It's child friendly, it's old person friendly. You cannot throw one of these riders into a complex intersection or interchange that's totally car oriented. So it's going to need to be that ultra comfortable infrastructure. Back to that point. Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
I
So,
totally
yeah.
agree.
Chun-Li, you are saying something?
Yeah, maybe I can add a little bit because I think I absolutely agree what Dr. Cherry has been talked about. I think definitely we will kind of at least brings back some cyclists to increase, even though afterwards. I'm not sure if we can sustain or not, but I think one thing maybe is important to do during this time period is to monitoring what is the effect or what is the changes of the child behavior to which extent. So for them, we know people maybe change their behavior because of coronavirus, but do we know maybe part of them would like to continue after coronavirus because they feel like it is actually convenient and more easy to go. So, I mean, for researcher in academic world, maybe it's a good chance for us to, or we need to do this kind of monitoring studies to understand more about what is going on in a more in-depth level. And because some cities even prepare for they call the phase 2 plan. That is to handle how it will be after the COVID-19 time immediately. And it would be also good input to develop some scientific evidence for them to make decision for the next steps. Yeah,
Great.
that's what
Yes. Okay. So,
good. Yeah.
Professor Pandit, you would like to say something on that?
I would just like to add that, bicycling is a challenge in India. Based on a lot of surveys that we have done, the primary reason why, choice rider don't use it is because of safety. And then comes the weather. We need to take care of both. Without this too, we cannot actually do anything, or we cannot promote bicycling. I think there is also a requirement of the political will, which was missing, but now gradually, because there is a demand, the political will is also forming. So many cities are introducing bicycling infrastructure, but again, the expertise required to bring in this kind of proper infrastructure is not there. So when there are construction companies which should be able to design, which should be able to construct, but until unless they get a good design, they will not be able to construct a proper bike lane. I think there is a missing, expertise level that still needs to be filled in our cities. There is a lot of research going on at the academic level, but to put in that research into the field, there is still a gap that has to be bridged. So my suggestion is design infrastructure as per Indian context. Weather protection, first priority. Then safety of the cyclist, second priority. So in that way, if we go on, or either of them, both are equally important, more or less. So this too is the primary thing, and we can only focus on the major corridors, and the minor corridors we can leave it, that our cyclists are pretty intelligent, they'll be able to negotiate in the minor corridors. But in the major corridors, we definitely need to introduce these features. And then I think along with that, bicycle shares and all these things gradually will pick up. Yes, there is a definite, shock to the system because of COVID. But considering the, population, considering the way the entire society is moving, definitely these things are going to pick up within maybe another year or so. So there is just a break for a year. So we need to look beyond that.
Exactly. We are approaching 8:30 in the evening in India. So, the discussion was so engrossing. I know that we have overshot the time limit by a long shot, but it was really, really engrossing. And we got a lot of clues into what we can and what kind of studies that need to be set up right now. But I would, I need to conclude for tonight, even though I would have loved to have carried on this discussion for maybe 15-20 minutes more. But we really are reaching dinner time here. So I would just like to propose a vote of thanks at the end. First of all, I would like to thank Professor Dr. N. Sridharan, director of our school, who have inspired us, the faculty of SP Bhopal, to go for these kind of webinars. Then Dr. Shivli Mitra, the Dean of Academic Affairs in SP Bhopal, who is coordinating the organization of these webinars. Then I would like to thank my co-researchers, Dr. Shama Puntambekar and Dr. Sukanto Mazumdar, who are on the team that is working on the e-bicycle sharing project for rural areas here. And my research assistants, Anil and Vigneshwar, who have done a wonderful job helping me out with this and in the field also. In fact, the nice poster was designed by Anil. It was appreciated by a lot of people. And to all the technical staff here in SPA Bhopal who gave us wonderful support for hosting this, even in these difficult times. And to all our speakers, I would definitely like to keep in touch with you, build some bridges. Maybe we'll discuss this offline. We'll have more discussions if we could collaborate on some future studies. We're already trying to approach some of the bike share operators here in India. And if we can get some other people on board also, we can probably look forward to some very good studies coming up in the future months. So with that, I would like to thank you all for joining in. And I'm going to close it for now, but we'll definitely keep in touch. Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for organizing this session and let me to know all the colleagues internationally. And I'm glad I see you in the real world when I have read your paper before. Yeah.
Good to meet you all. Thank you. Yeah, take care.
Thank you so much, Doctor. Take care. Yeah.
Bye.
Thanks a lot, Professor.
Okay, good night.